once again. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala. We're going to be talking about Mayor Adams in Albany with the tin cup. That's what they're calling it. He's asking the state for money, including for half of the migrant expenses to be covered. So we'll be getting to that. But I'd like to introduce our co-hosts. We've got Jay Carter, also known as Timid, hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Same old, man. A little bit of a headache this morning. Didn't sleep all the way, but got to keep pushing.
Yeah, I've actually been sick myself.
I saw that. I saw the post about that. You good?
Yeah. I'm all right. It's funny. It keeps morphing every day, right? So a couple of days ago, I was coughing a lot and I had a really stuffy nose. I seem to have gotten beyond that, but then I got up feeling weaker, right? You would think as you were getting over the sickness, you would be getting your strength back, but I got that. It's like every day it takes on a different iteration. So I'm still not myself. I still feel down.
How about you, Sheba? How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I can't complain. I'm doing good, besides it being cold. But other than that,
I hear that.
yeah, everything's the same.
When voters, you still got your Golden Gate Bridge background there,
huh? Yeah. Maybe one day I'll drive cross country.
yeah. Same here.
I'll pass.
Well, one thing that you apparently did not pass on, Jay, was watching those Breakfast Club interviews that I'm sure came up on your feed. Maybe it was like a car crash you couldn't turn away.
Yeah, I don't generally watch the interviews. I mean, sometimes it's a rare occasion if someone's on there and I'm thinking, okay, this might be an interesting interview. But actually, in the last week, I've watched 3, and they're like at least an hour and a half each. I watched the Piers Morgan interview, the Vivek Ramaswamy interview, and the Nikki Haley interview. And just yeah, I guess they were interesting, and I couldn't turn away. I think you watched a couple of them as well, right?
Yeah, believe it or not, I watched all 3 of them, and I'm like you. I don't really watch a lot of that stuff for whatever reason. They were on my feed, maybe because I'm homesick. I don't know what it is, but I also saw them and watched them all the way through.
Yeah, it was just like I couldn't believe that I just kept watching. And actually the first one was the Piers Morgan one, and I started only about I was looking for a specific point because I saw like a reels or a shorts that came up and he said one kind of comment, and I was like, okay, I want to hear the rest of this. And so I went into that video, pulled up the transcript, did a search to find that point in the video, and went right there just to listen to that, and just kept watching all the way through, and then went back and watched the full thing. So yeah, it was crazy. One of the main things I took from that is it's Vivek, not Vivek.
Yeah, he says rhymes with cake.
You're right. Because I think people have been calling him Vivek this whole time. And he's like, no, it's Vivek, rhymes with cake. I was like, okay. So what did you think about these interviews?
Honestly, the one that stood out to me, and maybe it's a matter of recency because I saw it last, was the Nikki Haley one. The Piers one seemed to be mostly about his background. He talked about being on the Celebrity Apprentice and working with McCowell and that whole, his history. It wasn't too interesting from a substance point of view for me. The Vivek was just, oh, okay, here we go again. He's saying what he says, and I don't think he was challenged enough by the hosts.
I agree.
I think the Nikki Haley one was the most interesting to me, and I felt like they were pushing back a little bit more on her.
I agree. I think they should have pushed back a little bit more, but you're right. I think they definitely pushed back more than the other 2 interviews. I think even Envy had a couple of things to say, whereas in prior ones he was pretty much silent the whole time, and it was just Charlemagne that was doing the dialoguing. But I mean, Charlemagne did directly dispute some things, like she's, when she was maintaining, what was the point? about Obama being the reason for division in the country. And, he's like, no, it was a white lash type of thing. And he's like, it was
Right.
racism. And, and he did.
I think that was a talking point that came directly from Fox News
Yeah.
because I had never heard that
Oh,
until
yeah.
someone, but the first time I heard it was when a Fox News viewer
Yeah.
confronted me with it. And I was like, oh, is that what they're telling you on Fox News? Because I had never heard that outside of that before. Like,
Yeah.
it seemed like that was a big thing that was repeated in that world specifically.
Yeah. That side maintains that position that we didn't have this division, this big partisanship, this talks until Obama. Obama is the one that sowed these seeds. Like,
And that's
they believe.
ridiculous. And in fact, Charlemagne did push back on that, and he said that that really comes from the right wing media. And
Yeah.
Nikki Haley didn't even deny that, right? She said, well, regardless of where it came from. But I mean, that's your answer.
Right.
That's a weak response. You're acknowledging that it was the right wing media that created this, but you're still blaming Obama for it.
Right. And I think, yeah, he could have pushed even more on some other points. One thing that was really interesting about this is because, with Nikki Haley, some of the big controversy that's been following her for the past couple of weeks was her, and we talked about it here, about her answer in regards to what the cause of the Civil War was, and she just wouldn't say slavery. But she walked those statements back on the Breakfast
Right.
Club,
I was
saying
surprised.
that,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
surprised.
saying that, oh, I thought he was asking about something of a cause other than slavery, like basically saying like it's a foregone conclusion that it's slavery, but I thought
Yeah,
he wanted a different answer, so I gave a different
right,
one. Like, come
right.
on.
And I kind of understood her perspective just in terms of sometimes when you have someone like that approach you at a town hall or a meeting or whatever it is, you can tell that they're not on your side. And so maybe you do overthink because you immediately recognize that they're trying to set you up for some kind of gotcha. And that's kind of what she was saying, that I knew this was a gotcha question and I stumbled because I overthought it. And I understand that perspective. But the
Right.
substance of what she said didn't really resonate with me because, I mean, come on. I mean, it just, again, it kind of sounded like she was talking out of both sides of her mouth.
And she did that quite a lot during that interview, and it was very, very evident. To be
Yeah.
honest, that's probably the most I've heard her speak at one sitting. And she did that a lot because she was saying about like what she went on Trump, talking about he's unfit, he's done damage to the country, he's very bad for the country and democracy and all this and that. And then Charlemagne's like, yeah, but you voted for him twice, you
And he
know,
served in his administration.
and you served in his administration. And then she was like, oh, well, he did what he was supposed to do. He was his issues are correct. And it's like, which is it? Is he
Here's the
bad for the
thing. Yeah, here's the thing that really struck me about that. And my response, and I was having a conversation with someone who also saw this interview, right? And I said, it's hard for me to take you seriously when you say this person was needed at the time
Right,
because her quote, he's good at breaking things, good at
right,
breaking things, right? And then, so the question is, okay, well, once then, how come you're running against him now, right? Why isn't he the right one now? And your answer is, well, he brings too much chaos. So
right,
you need to tell me that you couldn't foresee that the person who was good at breaking things would bring too much chaos. So
right.
it's hard for me to take her seriously. Either you're lying or you're just not very smart.
Right. It's like, yeah, why are you running? Well, he was good at the time because he's good at breaking things. Well, why are you running? Because things are broken. Well,
Right,
he
right.
broke
The
them.
thing that
And you voted for that.
the reason why I voted for him happened, and that's why I'm now running against him because we can't have
Right,
that.
right, right. Yeah. And Charlemagne, he pushed back a little bit on that, but I think he could have went further and kept drilling that point a little bit further. Because she kept bringing it up over and over again. I think he only pushed back like once, maybe twice.
But here's the thing, though. So the person I was talking to told me that that was a brilliant answer that she gave, but they kept attributing this other part, her apparently saying he's good at breaking things, but he's not good at putting them back together. He was like, that was a brilliant way of describing it. And she didn't. I went back to rewatch it. In fact, she did not say that in the beginning. She did say that at the end of the interview, and maybe that is a more artful way of trying to phrase it. I don't know. But in the beginning, when that question first came up, she did not say that. She just
Right.
said he was good at breaking things, but he brings chaos. That's why we can't have him. And that doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, she contradicted herself a lot
Right,
during
right.
that.
And the whole thing about the Confederate flag, right?
Right.
wanted to go on in great depth, which by the way, she didn't walk this back. She didn't walk back the part about America not being a racist country, right? She stuck to that. Right? That
Right,
was
she did.
her holding on to that belief.
But at the same time, she was still trying to talk about how she's faced racism.
Right. And
Yeah.
she also gave a big speech about how she fought to remove the Confederate flag from the South Carolina state capitol. And I think Charlemagne even asked, well, then why did you do that? If America doesn't have a problem with racism, why are you even bothering taking down the flag?
Yeah.
She sounds like she's all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason why she walked back the statement on slavery, and probably because the reason why she gave these other answers is because of the backlash that happened because of that answer, that you know, her base loved that answer. They loved that for sure. But if she's trying to get a bigger platform, she's gonna have to at least make some kind of concession there. And I think this is what kind of tempered those things.
Well,
So
it's interesting though that she's doing this in advance of the South Carolina primary.
yeah.
So it's not like she's trying to gain more moderate voters in California right now. I mean, she's trying to get
Right.
the South Carolina Republicans. So is it the right time? You know, maybe
Right.
she did that because of the people that she was talking to. We see that she
Right.
talks out
That's
of
true.
her mouth. Maybe she was pandering to the audience. It was a breakfast club, hip hop station, black hosts. That could be the reason too.
Right. And the audience is New York City, which is fairly liberal, and so and a large contingent of people of color. So that could be, you know,
Right.
like what was it, like Hillary Clinton showing up with the hot sauce in her bag.
Yeah, people always talk about that. Although from what I understand, that actually was true. It sounded like pandering, but it actually was actually the case with Hillary. She actually does walk around with hot sauce in her bag. I think the way she communicates seems a little tone deaf, though.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, she's from Arkansas, so like she is from the South. So I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but still, it did come off
It
like
came off
that.
a certain way, yeah. Speaking of her being all over the place, Haley, the abortion issue, she wouldn't even take a stand one way or the other. I mean, she did say she was pro-life, but she didn't accept the initial categorization. I think that Envy gave, right? He said that she's pro-life because her husband was it because her husband was adopted, time conceiving, whatever. She rejected that. She's like, well, that's what the Democrats say. But then she gave a very long answer where she basically said the same thing, but she wouldn't really be committal one way or the other. She wants to be like, I think she wants to be everything to everybody on the issue.
Right. I think she did explicitly say, I'm against it because my husband was adopted. I think she explicitly said
Right,
that.
right. I think Envy said, well, I read here that you're pro-life because you had a hard time conceiving, and she got upset.
Right. That.
She said, but I think but in her answer, she mentioned both, that she had a hard time conceiving and the fact that her husband is adopted.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but then she also was talking about, but you know, realistically, we can never federally ban abortion countrywide, and so it's up to the states, and the states want to be pro-choice, that's on them. I'm fine with that. And so she was saying she was pro-life, but she was also saying pro-choice is cool too. It's like, it just again was like another example of her, I guess, triangulating, you would call that.
Yeah, I think she was, yeah. So I mean, again, I did watch the whole interview. It obviously was interesting, but it, you know, I wish they would have pushed back further on her. And I've seen a lot on social media them people criticizing Envy and Charlemagne, saying, look, if you're going to have these politicians on, you need to at least have the knowledge and the wherewithal to be able to question them. But you know, to be honest, I think Charlemagne did push back more than many journalists do on some of these candidates.
Yeah.
Especially on those issues about race. I think they
right.
pushed back a lot more than I've seen any.
You know what's interesting though, and I don't know if this is something different or new in his style, but in my mind, the Charlemagne of yesterday or of previous years might have been more forceful in his approach. Maybe not substance, that might have been the same, but in terms of being more confrontational, it seemed like he was very soft spoken in the way he was asking the questions.
Respectful.
It came It came off as, but more than respectful, it came off as almost deferential. And I think that's where some people maybe have issue. Like it sounds like he's not being forceful enough with them, even just in his manner of speaking to them.
Right. Yeah. Like why don't you go after her like you went after like Beanie Siegel? Why did you go after her like you went after Lil Mama? Like you made that girl cry. Like
Yeah, but I get
like
it. I mean, look, this is the former governor and UN
sure,
ambassador, and you want to treat them with a little more respect. But
sure.
then again, you should treat everyone with respect. I don't think it's a matter of being disrespectful. It's just a
Right.
matter of being forceful, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I was interested. It was interesting. You mentioned South Carolina real quickly, so just a real quick shout out to Biden for demolishing the primary. That's just crazy.
And that
Was it like
says something, right?
98%,
Yeah,
98% or
it's
something
like
like that?
97%. And
Mhm.
some people will be dismissive of that. Oh, it's a joke of a primary. Hold on a second. We have to put this in the proper perspective, right? Right now, yes, you've got two presidents, a former president and the current president, going through the primary process. One of them is
Mhm.
having a much more difficult time than the other, right? Let's call it as it is. And the fact that you've got 97%, you could usually run a ham sandwich. You can put a rock on the ballot and they can, against an incumbent, right? And they can usually
Mhm.
be expected to get at least 25% just on the anti-incumbent vote. The fact that he got 97% tells you that the people want Joe to be the nominee, right? That's very, very clear at this point.
Yeah. And then take that into account last week, the New Hampshire primary where he wasn't even on the ballot and he got 78, 75% of the vote for the write-in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I
So
think you could put that to rest that the people don't want Joe. I mean, the results clearly say otherwise.
yeah, so far it's showing so. So, but yeah, that's interesting. Who knows who's gonna be on the scene next? I don't foresee being interested in anybody else's interview. I don't even know why I was interested in theirs, but um
Yeah, if you only
so
watch what Piers
Vivek,
Morgan interview this week.
yeah, Vivek is on like a circuit right now. He's popping up on every show. All I see now is within the past week he's been doing these podcasts and these interviews
Listen, he's
all
trying to take advantage of his newfound fame, trying
which
Yeah.
he
to.
said he wasn't gonna do in his interview on the Breakfast Club. I'm not trying to monetize this. I don't want
Well,
to.
I mean, okay, I don't know if it's monetizing, but he is certainly making the rounds, right? He's not hiding. He's putting
Yeah.
himself out there in the public and going on all these shows and
Mhm.
making himself extra visible, and so he is doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
One thing that was, and I forgot how much. Do you remember how much money he said that he spent on the campaign? Was it 20 million?
It was a lot of millions, and he talked about like it was no big deal,
Right, right.
but it was a lot of millions, and it sounded like he was saying it was coming out of his pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. His own
Really.
personal money he spent. It was many $million that he spent on the campaign. That was the most striking thing, I think, for me about that interview, because I was thinking about that's basically the cost of fame. I mean, if you have that kind of money, you could run for president and become a celebrity. Even if you don't win,
Right.
Right.
he didn't win. He is now a celebrity, right? For better or worse. And he's
Mhm.
got that fame. And, there it is. He bought, that's what he did. He bought himself celebrity status.
It said
Mhm.
he spent close to $30 million out of his own pocket.
Yeah. So if you have $30 million laying around, you can become a celebrity too.
Probably do it for
Sounds good to
Yeah,
cheaper
me.
than
you do it
30
for
million.
cheaper.
But so yeah, interesting interviews.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
All right. Well, we were looking at what's going on in the news, trying to find interesting things. I guess our main topic here is going to be the Tin Cup Day. Have you heard this term before? I never heard Tin Cup Day before, and I've worked in the legislature as an attorney. Tin
Mhm.
Cup Day. I guess it's why a tin cup? They're saying the mayor is going up to Albany basically with a cup, like it's to me it's like a tip jar. I don't know, a tin cup, is that what people
yeah,
go
tin
for money?
cup. It would
Yeah.
be that would be from days gone by when beggars used to beg with tin cups.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
think the 1920s and before. I've
Okay,
Mhm.
never
really old
heard of it
reference.
called. Yeah, I've never heard of it called Tin Cup Day, but
Right.
Yeah.
you said
And-
Tin Cup
yeah.
Day, I
And I've
immediately
been through this process. This process is nothing new. What happens is, yeah, obviously the
right.
state every year goes through its budget process, right? How it's going to allocate state funds. And so the mayor will go to Albany asking for a share of it, right? More than a fair share for New York City. They're advocating for the city, and it's
Mhm.
not just the mayor of New York that does it, but of course it's big when the mayor comes up, and it's kind of like a song and dance that happens every year. And New York City is really the driving force of the state economy. And so these things are very much intertwined. So one of the things that's noteworthy, of course, the mayor is asking for mayoral control to be extended so that he can keep controlling schools and so forth in the city. But the headlines coming out of this really are that the mayor is asking for the state to cover half of the bill for the migrant crisis.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think about that, Shiva, that the state should cover half of that bill?
I don't think the state. I don't feel that the state should.
Mm.
I think maybe not half. Maybe they can give him a quarter. But I don't think they should
But when you say
fund
a quarter, do you mean 25 cents or do you mean 1/4?
that. No, a quarter of what he might be asking for.
Gotcha.
What is
Okay,
he
so a quarter of what he might be asking for, that'd be a quarter of that half then.
Yes,
Okay, so not even a quarter of the total cost, it's a quarter of the half.
exact. Because you have there are other mayors, I'm sure, that are there besides him. So
Right, but to be
how,
clear, he's not asking for a half of the state's budget on this. He's asking for half of the New York City cost of the migrant crisis to be covered. So in theory, other mayors and smaller cities could also be asking for half of theirs covered.
Right.
Their bill is going to be a lot smaller.
maybe not. Things are very expensive after the pandemic.
I mean, but then, come on, in New York City, you know that we're going to have the highest costs. There's most people
Yeah.
left.
It depends because I know like in Monroe County, you have apartments going for over $2,000, $3,000. So it depends.
And how much does a homeless shelter provider make per room per month in New York City? More than that.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I don't know what the cost is in New York City because they are putting them up in the hotels. Is he asked them to covering the cost of the hotels?
The entire bill, half of the bill, right? That the city itself has to pay, right? He's asking them to cover half of the expenses.
So what are the expenses?
Yeah, that is part of it. It's the resources, right? Well, we talked about that. All the resources that are strained now in the city as a result.
Right. And then that's what he was kind of I mean forewarning about back you know what end of 2023 or the October September time around there. He was talking about how the strain was too great. I mean, at that time, it's probably much greater now. At that time, it was like almost 120,000 migrants had come in New York in 1 year. And so like it was killing the state's budget, the city's budget.
What were the costs? See, I don't know. What were they paying for? Were they paying for their transportation to get here?
No, they were paying
housing.
Yeah, what's housing?
Yeah.
Housing, food.
And clothing? Are they paying for their clothing?
I don't
Medical?
know.
See,
I'm sure
what's
there's
all in that
all kinds of help. Yeah. Jeremy in the
He's
chat
also asking for his
says-
legal bills, which is interesting, right? Because the city has been going to court trying to fight some of this. Remember, they were trying to
Right.
the right to shelter or modify it and so forth. And so they're racking up hefty legal bills as well on this.
Jeremy in the chat was asking how much is the federal government pitching in?
Not much. And in fact, Adams pretty much is giving up on the federal government pitching in. That's why he's asking for more from the state. So I just wanted to stat off here, talking about numbers. The city says 173,000 migrants have arrived in New York since the spring, and more than 67,000 of them are currently in the shelter system. That's according to the Gothamist.
Right.
So
you know what? That is more than that's about the size of the population of this prefecture that I'm in.
The prefecture is what, like a county?
It's like a state.
Oh, like a state.
Hmm.
Wow.
No. I'd say no, it's the size of the city that I'm in, not the whole prefecture.
Okay.
I walk that back. Probably the size of the city, which is quite spread out. But Tallahassee was about 180,000 people.
Right.
That's not an insignificant number. That's
a lot.
And someone made the point. I want to get your thoughts on this. That according to this person that I saw on an interview, they said that at first people were upset with the Republican governors like Abbott in Texas for sending these migrants to cities like New York, right? But they said that ultimately that proved to be effective because it's for the first time showing cities like New York that there is a crisis where previously it was just the border areas that were overwhelmed with with the resource problem, but now that other cities are getting they're saying that it's making it harder for people in the cities to be dismissive of the immigration issue when now they're a problem too.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Shiba?
Well, with the with that migrant, so they're saying that New York feels that it's real now,
Yeah.
but with the it, with them migrants coming to New York City and feeling that he knows now that there wasn't just on TV. How what was his thoughts, his political thoughts on the migrants? See, I don't know what Eric Adams, what he thought about the migrants, what he said about the migrants. The only thing I heard him say was that New York was a sanctuary city and that the migrants could come here. So that tells me he knew something. He knew it had to be real, or he wouldn't have made that statement.
Well,
I think everyone knew it was real. It's just some of the southern states have been saying it's much bigger than people realize and understand. And so the fact that 170,000 in the past year have come to New York or been sent to New York, that it shows that there's a massive amount of people coming through, where others were downplaying how many were coming across.
Right, but I think him being in politics that he could not know that. How could he not know that?
well, it's not about knowing it or not. I think it's about whether it's you're a problem or not. And it isn't only about the mayor, it's about the people, attitudes of the people in the cities as well, right? Because you talk about New York being a sanctuary city. The argument goes, the idea is that it was easier for people in these cities, not just New York, right? But basically any of these cities that are away from the border to say, listen, home of the free, land of the brave, Statue of Liberty. We love the immigrants. We're pro-immigrant. We're sanctuary cities. We protect immigrants, and basically never acknowledge the seriousness of the issue, right? And basically paint anyone who acknowledges such seriousness as evil, right? Because it never hit them. So it was easy and again, this is not my argument. This is what the argument that I saw presented was that from afar it's easy to be like, oh, you guys that are saying that immigration is a problem, you're just bad people. But then when it hits your home and it hits your backyard, now you're confronted with the reality of it and your perspective is forced to change.
But that's my point. How could he not know that? That wasn't a reality.
Everyone who lives in New York City.
Huh? I'm sorry?
They're talking about everyone who lives in New York City.
Everyone,
the attitudes of the people in the city, yeah.
But did everyone in New York City feel that way? Did the majority of the people feel that way in New York City?
What way? That to be pro-immigrant?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that the thing here is, even with Adams knowing, and I don't think it's not that he didn't know, but what he didn't foresee, and probably no one foresaw, was that states like Texas and Governor Abbott were going to use that sanctuary city statute or whatever it is against them, because a lot of these are being sent from Texas and these places, these border towns. So they're busing them up to and dropping them off in New York, because they're saying, okay, you said you're a sanctuary city, here, have all of these people. That wasn't what was expected. No one thought that they were going to start just like shipping migrants like cargo to other states.
Yeah,
and is it right to do that?
Yeah, that's another thing.
You know what?
Yeah,
I would definitely say no, that's
question.
not right.
Right.
I would definitely say no, that's not right. But you could also look at the other side of that and say, well, they're sending them to a place where they know they're going to help them.
Mm-hmm.
But
so giving them help that they came for. You know what I mean? Like,
the thing is that if you don't have, if you know what you can afford as a city to do.
Right.
The
Sure.
New York City has not handled their homelessness, the homeless population for some years now.
And
Well,
essentially that's what the sanctuary city
Yeah,
idea was about, wasn't about taking in migrants. It was more about making sure that the homeless population
well, no, hold on a
had
second.
guaranteed help.
That's what right to shelter is.
Oh,
right. But still,
The sanctuary, but again, the sanctuary city
oh,
thing,
right,
that goes back really to this idea that it wasn't a tremendous issue in a
right,
city like New York until more recently, right?
right,
Because they weren't being bussed in by these
right,
numbers until more recently. And so it's easy to say we're a sanctuary city, or at least easier when we're not being burdened as much. And it becomes a
right.
problem when you have to deal with the reality of the resource strain. I mean, it's just a logistical issue at that point.
right,
Right.
but the right to
So it's
shelter.
easy to, I guess the idea is it's easy to be more idealistic when the problem isn't hitting you directly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And to again to look at it on the other side, I think it has been shown that some of the fears and whatnot that places like Texas and these border towns are complaining about are a little bit overblown. I did see a video recently where some MAGA folks had went down there to the border because, that's where they're called to do, and get there, and she's like, "Yeah, I saw some people come across, but this is not an invasion like we've been told." So, some of it's hyperbole and marketing and but some of it obviously is also real that people are coming across the border.
And then you have, on a related point, people in New York who don't believe that this is really a tremendous strain on our resources. They think that
Right.
people, the mayor, are over exaggerating for whatever
Right.
reason, right? For
Right.
political points or money from the government or whatever. But they think that really this is just right wing fanaticism.
And that to me is people who are, I guess, on the left doing the same thing, the cognitive dissonance that people on the right do. Because even if you don't agree with any of the talking points or the reasons why they're there, you have to just economically understand you can't put 170,000 people on government assistance all at once and it not be a strain on a budget.
right,
Oddly,
right.
there are people I hear from who don't seem to understand that point.
Like I don't like just the numbers. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like taking care of 170,000 people,
That's a lot of people.
feeding and housing them every day. I
Right,
mean, it's gonna cost a lot of money.
right.
It doesn't
Because
matter if you agree with helping them or not. Just looking at the
exactly.
number point of it, you have to say this is definitely going to be something critical.
Right, because when him asking for that for the migrants, how much of that is going to cut into those that are, like I said, that are homeless, that still need shelters, that
Well, we
needs,
saw that.
yeah, what happens to that budget?
Well, that's what happened in what was it, November, December, when Adams announced that the budget was going to have to be cut across
Mhm.
the board by what was it, 5% or something like that?
I think it was 25%,
Wow.
or was it 15? 15, it might
Maybe
have
it's
been 15
15.
initially.
Maybe it's
Right.
15. But yeah,
But,
he mentioned it.
and
That
so
everybody was
here's
gonna
what
lose.
they'll tell you. They'll tell you that you're all taking a Republican or conservative approach to the problem. All your solutions are about spending, cutting back on the spending. What you need to be doing is raising revenues by making the wealthy pay their fair share, closing tax loopholes. And if you do that, you'll have all the money that you need to house everyone.
I agree with that too. I
Yeah,
think both can be applicable. You can raise
it
revenues
has
by
to be a
making the
balance, and I
rich pay their fair
understand.
share, but
Yeah,
also be
a
aware that
balance.
this is a huge a huge new outlay that's coming. Both are
Have the
valid.
migrants stopped coming to New York City? Are
No.
they still coming?
Yeah,
Yeah.
constant. They're being constantly sent there. And it's not that they can't, not that they cross the border and are like, I'm going to New York. It's like
Right.
Right.
Right. And then you
Texas
have
and
people who are tricked, right? And I don't know every
yeah.
conversation that goes on at the border, but I've heard stories of this. At least when they were sending them to Martha's Vineyard and these places,
Right.
that they were told that they were be given a job somewhere. They were
Right.
sent for work, but they were really just, dumped on, I don't know, I think like the Kennedy's doorstep or these like symbolic places. I think they
It was
targeted the
Kamala
president.
Harris's
Kamala
house.
Harris is right.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously they weren't being sent there for jobs. They were sent there to be political pawns. And it's like,
Right.
to me, that strikes me as a form of kidnapping and human trafficking.
That I agree with.
But,
That is not, that shouldn't be, and should be kind of prosecutable in a way. I mean, like you said, it's kind of a form of kidnapping, and because they misled them to believe that they were helping them, taking them somewhere, and then they just basically dropped them off, and it was in the winter too, so just dumped them off at the doorstep.
yeah, that's not
It's,
right. Yeah, that's
no,
yeah.
it's not right. Now, if you're going to, I think there's a different argument there if they're sending them to a an intake center in another city and they're aware that they're being sent there. It's like, okay, well, we can't help you here, but we know you can get help over here. You might have some wiggle room in an argument there, but just being like, oh yeah, we're gonna take you there, get you a job, and then go there, drop them off, be like, peace out. Like,
And this
no.
does happen with refugees. I saw a documentary a long time ago
Oh,
about refugees who came into the U.S. and they were bused to different places, and they were asked, "Well, how come you're going to Minnesota or some random place?" And they say, "I don't know. Like we just get divided up and just sent different places."
well,
Yeah,
Mike,
that's
how come? I have a question for both of you. Why hasn't the federal government come in to uh, give monies or have a budget for migrants when they
Well,
like what's going on in New
why
York
do you
City?
think?
Is the
Why do you
federal
think that is?
government?
Look at the gridlock in Washington and who controls the bodies of Congress, right?
yeah. I don't think the Republicans are going to make any kind of vote to make any kind of money come out. Plus, that's to be fair here, when Adams did ask the federal government for more money, even people in Biden's administration were blaming him for not planning ahead or something like that. So both sides have kind of put it on his shoulders when it was really a situation that just kind of fell in his lap.
All right, so we want to do the poll question. We can make it about this. I also wanted to ask about the debit card program because someone actually tagged me in a post on
Right.
Facebook about that. So let's start with the mayor asking the state to cover half of the expenses. We can make that the poll question, unless you want to do it on the
No,
debit.
go for it.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So the poll question of the week is: do you agree with New York City's mayor that the state of New York should cover half of the migrant expenses for the city?
Yeah, we'll see what that is. And there was a question Jeremy in the chat asked, should we be a sanctuary for Americans or the whole world? How can we take care of the world? I think it's a question a lot of people are asking as well, especially when we've talked here several times about that study that came out that showed that over 50% of New Yorkers can't pay their bills.
Right.
Right.
Right. I do want to
Exactly.
mention, I think the term sanctuary city, sanctuary state, it gets thrown around in a heavily politicized way that might miss the mark in terms of what it was intending to do. It
Yeah.
really,
That's true. Yeah.
and I think part of the issue is it's a term that's from a different era, really, and is
Right.
being used in today's era. It's a different climate, and it kind of, I think, clashes with what it was originally for. So the idea behind it was that we weren't going to cooperate with the federal officials, immigration officials, who were going to come in. And at the time, remember under Trump, especially, they were trying to come in and rip kids out of school, separate them from their parents, and put
Right.
them in cages at the border. And so we
Uh-huh.
were saying, and I think Koch might have been the first person to use sanctuary city, but so it goes back a while. But that was always the gist of it, that we weren't going to cooperate with the federal government when they would come in. So our local police, NYPD in New York City, would not basically snitch on on these kids and
Uh-huh.
turn them over to the federal authorities who
Right.
were mistreating them, right? And there was a lot of abuse going on.
Right.
Right.
So that's really where that comes from. Today, it's being used to mean that we just want to welcome all immigrants of any stripe, just bring them all on. But it wasn't really a message that we were saying bring in hundreds of thousands of people and we don't care about what it does to our resources. It really wasn't about that,
Right.
right? It was
No, it
about
wasn't. Yeah,
cooperating
you're
with
right.
federal immigration authorities.
Because it came out in the 80s, right? Wasn't that something that was established in the 80s?
Under Koch.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it really, I think the last time we really dealt with it, and I think New York City reaffirmed its status as sanctuary city, was under de Blasio during Trump's
Uh-huh.
term.
right.
And that was when you had the ICE agents coming, trying to get into schools and
Uh-huh.
taking kids away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
I think
remember
even
that.
that fear was even before that as well, too, because I remember
Mhm.
it was in 2012 when we were doing the campaign and we were talking to people. It was regarding DACA and
Mhm.
those types of situations, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of places were calling themselves sanctuary cities at that time, again for the children and whatnot.
Right.
Right.
So you'll see it get reaffirmed by cities and states in response to what's happening at the federal level.
Right. So
But I think
yeah,
now it's being used as a way to attack the mayor to somehow paint him as someone who was saying, we want to do to bus us all these migrants. And that was really never what it was about.
right. Absolutely. Yeah. So and you mentioned the debit card program.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is something I was tagged actually shortly before getting online for the episode here. I can read off. Let me go on Facebook real quick and read off what this gentleman wrote in the Howard Beach Strong group.
Mm.
They tagged me. There's some comments here. Okay. So the post says, what can be done to stop giving illegal criminals, migrants, our legal American citizens, hardworking tax money, $1,000 a month? How is this legal? And then we've got a comment on the post here that says, it's 40% more for their food than our citizens get from monthly food stamps, but they promise to only use it in bodegas for food and baby items. Laugh emoji. They think we're all fools. I guess they're right since people keep voting them in office. And then the original poster says crazy, but hey, if you're an American hand, you lose. If you're an American hand, I don't know what that means, but hey, if you're an American hand, you lose all your S word. We get a one-time payment of 700.
Um, isn't that in regards to the COVID thing?
Uh-huh.
Maybe.
The stimulus.
Oh,
Right.
the
Stimulus thing. I think from what we were able to gather, some of that's a little bit skewed. It's that debit program is being pushed out or proposed to be pushed out to 500
It's a pilot
families.
program right now, right? So it could be
uh-huh.
expanded.
To 500 families initially, and if it works, they will talk about expanding it, and so that those debit cards will be usable at bodegas, supermarkets, grocery stores, and convenience stores. And this is gonna cost the city. It's gonna cost. Where was that? I just saw it was like 50. What was it like $58 million?
53
Right.
million, maybe.
53
50,
million.
53 million. Yeah, $53 million. However, the city officials saying that this program, it might cost 53 million, but it's going to save the city 7.2 million. So if they continue the way that they're doing it now, it's going to cost 7.2 million more, and this should save the city money.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion because you can look at it purely in terms of economics, but then you could also look at the message that it's sending, how
Right.
Uh-huh.
people are responding to it. You're getting posts like this, comments like this.
Sure.
It's riling up more anger in
Right.
people, certainly. It's causing more division. It is something that polarizes people. And then you
Absolutely.
can also look at what does that do long term? I mean, so the city is saying
Yeah.
that this is going to save them money just based on the
Uh-huh.
numbers as they stand now. But could that change the trajectory of the whole situation such that it becomes more expensive? Let's say if
Right.
more people start coming for these
Right.
benefits, is that going to become too much of a burden on the city? I mean,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, but I certainly see the point that people are making because let's say I responded to this guy and I said, well, look at it from an economic point of view. If it saves the city money, isn't that great? They're not going to say it's great. They're going to say it's unfair. That's what they're going to say, right? They're not looking at it from a purely economic point of view. And I think they're probably going to make the point that, listen, you say this is going to save us money, but will it really, or is it going to encourage more people to come and put more of a strain and create more of a problem for us?
Right. And you bring the point, like they're gonna say it's
Mhm.
on some people will say it's unfair. Like, look, I'm
Yeah.
busting my hump 40 plus hours a week. I'm paying my
Yeah.
taxes in New York. I need help. I'm struggling. Only 50% of us can't pay our bills. I
Right.
could use that same sort of assistance. Why can't I get that? And I'm the one contributing the money here. Like, what's going on?
Mhm.
So I can see that point there. So I think that has to be considered as well, even though at the same time, we you do want to be charitable and help people that are in need, that are, you know, families and children coming over. So,
Right. And
you
it's
know,
also one of those things where it's easy for it to become a meme in a
yeah,
sense, right?
Mhm.
It reminds me of giving Mets tickets. Have you heard that to people so they don't skip their court date? It became a joke. People
what?
kept saying
Mhm.
that. So they were doing that. They were when the whole bail reform issue was going on,
Mhm.
and people were complaining about bail reform. It came out that they were
Mhm.
giving out Mets tickets as an incentive for people to
Mhm.
not skip out on their court date. And so that just infuriated people even more
Mhm.
because it was so memeable, right? It was one
Right.
of those things that became such an easy talking point, such an easy thing to go after.
Mhm.
And it's something that you don't have to have a whole nuanced conversation to
Mhm.
get an emotional response out of someone. If you just say, can you believe that not only letting them out on bail, but they're giving them Mets tickets? Everyone's like, oh my God, this city has gone crazy, right?
All right.
So it's a similar type thing here. I think I can definitely see it becoming one of those things. Like, how serious are we getting about the migrant crisis when we're actually giving them debit cards? They're not giving us debit cards,
Right.
but they're giving these migrants debit
Right.
cards, right? And so
Right.
Mhm.
it's really hard to make an argument that it's a positive thing. You can try to talk about the economics of it all you want. I think just viscerally, it's going to rub people the wrong way.
Yeah. It is.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's important to be able to acknowledge that, right? People need to have those concerns acknowledged. It can't just be
Mhm.
like, oh, well, you're bad people because you have this kind of feeling. We need to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And in the same way we're talking
Mhm.
about, you need to acknowledge that, you know, 170,000 people will cause a strain. Like you have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Budgets are finite. They're not,
Mm-hmm.
money's just not
Right.
everywhere. Like they have to be spent and doled out in different ways, and different
Mhm.
services are being utilized for different different things. And so, that has to be acknowledged.
Right.
Because what about the medical? People talk about the food, clothing, and shelter, but what about when people get sick?
Right.
No one has said anything about that, and I'm
Sure.
sure not everyone's coming here is coming healthy.
Well, don't know if that's, true or not, but I'm sure there's going to be some people that need some care out of
And,
Yeah.
170,000
and I think we also have to acknowledge the fact, like, this particular commenter, this poster says, what could be done to stop giving, and they put in all caps, illegal criminals, migrants. Now, that's
That's a bad one.
a gray area, right? Because these
Oh.
folks are not presumed to be here illegally or unlawfully. Now, there
Right.
are issues with how the system is currently working, right? And you could argue that it's not working, and that's a valid argument to make. But people seeking asylum have to be given the chance to make their case. Not all of them are legitimate claims, I'm sure, but you also
Right.
can't presume them all to be quote unquote illegal.
Right. I think that's a harmful
Mhm.
mischaracterization. And it tends to, when you frame it that way, then that means then the people hearing it, or people who take that in, can be less empathetic
Right.
to their
So
plight.
I'm saying, right? And then it makes it a lot easier to ask a question or pose a question this way. How is it even legal for us to be spending our taxpayer money on these quote unquote illegal criminals? Right.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Right. So in the chat, we've got a couple of other questions that came in. Why is the federal government quicker to give money to Ukraine and Israel and migrants before Americans? A lot of people feel that way. And then with an extra 170,000 people, we need more sanitation, cops, schools, hospitals, etc. And that's very true as well, which is also gonna come at a
Right,
cost.
and that's right, and those are some of the services that we're seeing
Right.
being cut as a
Right,
result of this, right? And
right.
again, you have some who are naysayers. I mean, maybe you could say that they're akin to people who think we never landed on the moon, or just conspiracy theorists or whatever. But you have people saying, "Oh no, this is all overblown. This is just a right-wing talking point." And then the mayor, he's a cop, he used to be a Republican, and so you can't trust what he says. And so we really don't have a true budget crisis. He's just making it sound like we do because that's what that's his agenda or whatever. So you have people who don't even believe that it's a real issue and a genuine issue, and that they'll say if there is a strain on our resources, it's just because they're buying into the right wing propaganda. I've heard that.
Yeah.
But he cut the budget. Then he said that he was restoring the monies that were cut. Didn't that happen with Mayor Adams? That something about
I
the
think
cut seemed
initially he had made the statement about what was going to be cut, and then
right.
I think he walked back trying to cut the NYPD budget. But I don't think other places got that same
I thought it
favor,
was that.
so to speak.
No,
Um,
I thought I read where he said the budgets that were going to be cut, they weren't going to be cut again, or he was going to restore. Um, he was going to restore. Well, he was not going to cut them again, or he was going to restore the budget, restore the budgets or the monies that were cut from there. I thought I heard him say, and I thought it went all across the board with all the agencies because I know they were complaining about that.
Well,
yeah, all I remember is the NYPD getting their funds restored.
now he's trying to get half of the migrant crisis covered by the state, so he's trying to
Right,
find ways to bring the money in so that we don't have to cut so much in the city.
right. And to the other comment, I mean, that's regarding about the federal government sending money to Ukraine and Israel and migrants and Americans hurting and going through it is kind of appropriate with in the last couple of days there's been that talk about the $100 billion spending budget that's going to Ukraine and Israel, which people are like, hey, what's going on here? Why?
It's a valid question, right? To bring up, why are we spending so much money outside of our borders when we can't even get a handle on what's going on here?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. What's that Tupac line? You got money for wars, but never feed the poor.
Right.
So,
Although we see when they try to do that, that's something that people will complain about.
right. Exactly. So,
But it doesn't have to be a matter of feeding the poor necessarily, but at least ensuring that our services are not obliterated and we all have the opportunity to make something of ourselves, right? We're not held back by the fact that our government can't function. We at least, I think, want sanitation and and the basic services that we all come to rely upon. I don't think that's too much to ask.
right. And I think it's probably a fair characterization to say that the migrants coming in are not coming in looking explicitly for handouts. They're looking for work and for a better
That's
life.
part of the issue also, right? The fact that it's so difficult for them to get work because of the legal structure. I mean, sure, the laws in New York allow people to stay here and be sheltered.
Right.
When it comes to getting them sustainable employment, it's a bit of a different story.
Right. Yeah. So
And that's a problem, right? I think that is an indication that the system is broken in some way, right? The system shouldn't be set up so that everyone is allowed shelter, but not the ability to work. Because what that's saying is we are necessarily going to keep people dependent on the government and be straining our resources while not giving them the tools to get ahead. So it doesn't help anyone.
yeah, I think also though, I think there should also be allowances for the idea that the system never intended for this to be the situation, right? Like Like we mentioned, like this idea of guaranteed shelter or sanctuary city wasn't intended to be utilized in this way.
Right.
Right. This is kind of what happens when
I
you take
agree
it to
with
its
that.
logical extreme, I guess.
Or when you get people who like Abbott who want to make some sort of a political statement and push these different things, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I
Right.
mean, it would be
I think
similar. Think
it's
we
kind of like
have
a loophole, isn't it? Isn't it kind of like a loophole in the system? I mean, it's kind of like how you have loopholes in a tax code, right? And you said,
right,
well, the tax system wasn't intended for all these billionaires to not be paying any taxes, but they're able to utilize it as such. And I think it is on some level an indication that the system is not working as it's supposed to be working.
right. I mean, and yeah, and so think about it. It's kind of similar to what if half of everybody in New York all of a sudden filed for unemployment, right? The system probably can't support that.
Uh-uh.
And but it's not intended for it to be a mass influx of applications like that. It's to be there for assistance when people need it, but not for it, not counting on everyone doing it at the same time. Same thing if you go to your bank and you want to take out your money. If every one of their customers in the bank wanted to take
Right.
out their money at the same time, it's not possible because they don't have that money there.
Here's the thing: when you deal with things like insurance, well, what happens? There are safeguards. And of course, you could break the system in ways like you described, but what generally happens, like premiums go up, right, as more
Yeah.
claims are made as a way to
Uh-huh.
try to compensate for that. But there is no such limitation on the right to shelter, which is what they're trying to modify, right? So the right to
Uh-huh.
shelter is really an extreme, and so there is no check against that being overburdened, whereas there is when it comes to some of these financial
Right.
institutions, right? When it comes to, we do have insurance. Banks are FDIC insured. Like we said, when it comes to
Uh-huh.
insurance, premiums are going to go up as more claims are made. Nothing is happening to compensate for the shelter system being overburdened in New York.
Right.
Right.
The
And I
law is
think it's
just,
because they never expected it to be
right.
No.
type of overburdened all at once.
Uh-uh. Right.
So, and here's the tricky thing, right? Um, like I said, they probably never expected it to be overburdened to this extent all at one time. If Mayor Adams decided, okay, we're going to put those controls in place, now he's the bad guy. If he suddenly says, okay, there's a cutoff, we're not accepting anymore. Well, okay, now he's the bad guy. Now he's the Greg Abbott, you know. Oh, I thought you were trying to help people. What are you doing?
Mhm.
So it's like a
isn't that what he's trying to do when he goes to the court and asks for the Callahan decree to be modified? We shouldn't have right to shelter to the extreme, and he is saying that we need modifications to these
yeah.
systems.
So yeah,
Uh-huh.
but I'm just saying like
Yeah, and you're right. He does get blamed.
he's gonna get blamed for
Yeah,
that.
Right.
it is.
And that's the political climate that we're in. No matter what action you take, you're going to get attacked from one side or another or
Right.
both sides.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good word to describe the times, I think.
So we did have a poll from
Yes.
last week.
Let's see what that says.
Let's get into that. And this was another issue involving Adams, actually. Um, the city council had uh, overridden his veto on the How Many Stops Act, and so which would require police officers to document every encounter with New Yorkers, whether they were big or small. And so we asked, do you agree with the New York City Council's action to override the mayor's veto on the How Many Stops Act, which requires police officers to document investigative encounters? And we got 71% said they agree, 16% they didn't agree, 13% they didn't know. So overwhelmingly, people agreed that police should have to document these encounters, or they agreed with that veto to allow this to take place. There were a number of comments here, and all of them were pretty much in that affirmative. Yes, document everything. The police have repeatedly proven that they can't be trusted. Slow response times and excessive burdens. F you, Adams. So,
Oh, well.
Is there
yeah.
any nuanced conversation here or anything that tries to get at what we were talking about? Because we were really breaking down this legislation last week and talking about what the weaknesses might be, and try to
Mhm.
look at it from both sides. I mean, is anyone really driving at any of that?
Well, there was a person that said that
Mhm.
question kind of like they said, I love how we're constantly being told that requiring law enforcement officers to conform to a standard and be subject to accountability will somehow make it impossible for them to do their job, but doctors, nurses, etc., manage this fairly well. And people are like, it's excellent point that they document a lot and have found ways to do so efficiently. So walking,
Now, right.
talking into a dictating machine is too
Mhm.
difficult.
Part of the reason why you see doctors doing that is because they don't want to get sued, or if they are sued, they know
Right,
that they've got all their documentation in order. We know that is difficult to sue cops, right? With qualified immunity.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, Another person was, it sounded like they were iffy, but they said, I don't know if the city council got this right, but I don't trust the police to set the rules for themselves. Um, the city should give the law a
Mhm.
chance to work, but be ready to modify if needed. And I think that's probably a pretty good sentiment for any type of law going into effect. If
Mhm.
there's a weakness somewhere and there's a proposal, if it's, give it a chance to work. But again, if it needs to be amended or changed or fixed, be willing and ready to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And my question was really about those level one stops,
Right.
which,
Mhm.
to recap, they had three levels, right? Levels 2 and 3 were when people were under reasonable suspicion of a crime. So
Mhm.
look at them more as the suspects in that case. Level 1 was when the person stopped is not a suspect in any way. They're someone you're asking information from about a crime happening. So, it could be, did you see this guy running down the street? We saw a guy who's wearing this outfit, in the commission of a crime around here. Do you see which way he went? Something like that. That would be considered a level 1 stop. And
Right.
we wondered if it was too burdensome for the police to have to document every level 1 stop. Let's say that they were asking 50 people in a very short time. Is it going to interfere with their investigation to have to document all of these? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's worth looking at.
Right. And I did look into another after we got off just the pod last week that apparently there's about, we're talking about documenting every stop. Apparently there's approximately 3.2 million stops every year.
Mhm.
That's a lot of
That's
documentation.
citywide, statewide, countrywide,
Citywide.
citywide, NYPD.
Citywide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Citywide?
Yeah. So that's
Wow.
that's pretty significant number
Yeah.
of documentation.
Mhm.
And there was a comment here that did take the opposite route, saying that I appear to be in the somewhat of a minority here, but this sounds like using a shotgun to kill an ant.
Mm.
Um, Talking about the most effective policing occurs when police develop rapport and relationships with the citizens. I agree with that part. However, if it's not being done and we're seeing these abuses, something needs to be
Mhm.
tried, is
Mhm.
what I think.
Is there also a concern that the police won't ask questions? They won't actually do the investigation if they don't want to fill out all these reports.
Right. And he
Yeah.
did mention that if every officer is busy calculating how much time is going to be invested in documenting those routine face-to-face moments, it will de-incentivize the kind of introductions and day-to-day conversations that help build officers' citizen trust and familiarity. So, but again, the key was investigative stop. So even just so that type of doesn't really vibe with it, they can still have that cordial, hey, how you doing? That type of thing that builds
Yeah.
that rapport.
Mhm.
It's not an investigative stop. They didn't have to document it.
Reminds me, not long ago, I was walking on the street in Ozone Park, and a police officer approached me on foot, right?
Uh-oh.
And so, yeah, I think anyone, if this happens to you, you get a little nervous, right? You think, what is this? Why is a cop coming at me? And as he walked up to me and he said, "Hey, Mike," and then he just knew me. Then I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, how you doing, officer?" So would he? I guess that wouldn't be an investigative stop. He wouldn't need to fill out a report for that,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if he asked me, "Do you have any information on a crime around here?" I guess that would be
He can carry a tape recorder, right?
tape
That's
recorder
what doctors do. Yeah.
or
Oh,
body camera.
Yep. And if he get 50 people, he can interview 50 people with a tape recorder camera. He'd have it documented.
And then go what? Sit at the office and fill out 50 reports.
Well,
I
Well,
just
maybe
wonder, is there a likelihood of them not interviewing as many people if they know each one has to come with a report?
I'm sure that will reduce some people doing that.
yeah.
Whether
Or
that
even,
diminishes
as I said,
effectiveness.
go ahead.
I was going to say whether that diminishes their effectiveness in investigating
Uh-huh.
or if it diminishes harassment, we we won't know yet.
Right.
Yeah,
Or
this
as I
is
even
true.
said last week, what
Because
if it works
no,
the opposite direction? What if they wouldn't be stopping as many people, but there's pressure now on them to get these reports in? And so
Right.
they're told, hey, how come you don't have enough level one stops? You tell me you're out there investigating, go out there, investigate more crimes. And then now
Right.
Mhm.
stopping more people that they otherwise wouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Sheba?
No, I was going to say, I was going to ask, how many of those level ones have turned into possibly a level two?
Right.
Stop. It escalates to something else. Then it
Right.
escalates to
Right. The
something
person
else.
becomes a
And-
suspect. And that can
right.
happen, right? Maybe you're asking them a question, information on a crime, and then in the course of your questioning, you realize they're the ones who might have done the crime, and that could naturally happen. Or
Right.
I think the real distinction that's more blurry is between 2 and 3, right? Because if you read the description of a level 2 and a level 3, they're very similar. The only difference, I believe, is that in a level 2, the person reasonably thinks that they can leave. And in a level 3, the person reasonably thinks that they can't. And so it's more, does the person think that they're under arrest, or that they have to comply, or is it voluntary? And
Right.
you can see that being a gray area. Everyone might have a different reaction to that.
Right, but can they
Right.
leave in a level one, or they can just how's
Oh
that
yeah.
working?
Oh no,
They can
level
just
1 is the person is not a suspect at all. You just ask them for information.
Right.
and supposing I give you the wrong information and he can think I'm a suspect. Can that happen? Or does that happen? Or am I nervous? Or what are you stopping me for?
Yeah, and you become a suspect.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah.
So yeah, and interesting responses here. But yeah, overwhelmingly, people think that
Well,
they
I
should
think
have
the
to
good thing
document it.
about this is that the data is going to become public, right? And so we,
Right.
as a people, will have the opportunity to review the data and see what it
Right.
tells us, and go from there.
And it's an opportunity for the police officers to clean up their act. And then they can come back and say, hey, look, we haven't been doing this. We don't need this law anymore. So I think it's, maybe they need some accountability.
All right.
One of the last comment on this was, in an ideal world, documentation for every encounter shouldn't be necessary, but when a paramilitary force consistently assaults unarmed persons doing nothing illegal under the purview of probable cause, then claims protections from liability under implied immunity, it becomes a required component of community safety. And I agree with that.
NYPD on the whole is better than some of these other police forces. Not that they're perfect, and we've seen problems with them as well. But it seems like a lot of these reforms that are happening in New York are really done in response to what's happening nationally. And maybe they're going too far in New York when they're not really responsive to what's happening in New York specifically.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think when you think about police uh police departments going too far, NYPD, LAPD are at the top of the list.
I don't know. I'm thinking
I mean, think
Ferguson.
about think about
Yeah.
the stop and frisk numbers. Like that was just ridiculous. Those numbers were hundreds of thousands of stops and up
Uh-huh.
80
That
plus
came,
percent.
that was really Bloomberg driving it at the time, and then it was declared unconstitutional, and it's not being done like that anymore.
But the history is still there. Those
Yeah.
people who were stopped are still living there, who still have
Uh-huh.
that experience. I remember when we were living in I was living in New York, and my cousin, he's been on here a couple of times, KJ, he was living in Harlem, and he said every day when he would walk from his apartment to the train station to go to his office, he would, or come home, he would see these police officers doing the stop and frisk, and he would always, in the back of his mind, always think, one day it's going to be my time.
Right.
He had to live with that every day. So I mean,
Mhm.
I don't care if they stop doing it. The police officers at the police department, you don't automatically get that trust back. You have to prove it. And then every little thing that you do wrong that's maybe at a normal benchmark is still going to reinforce what you did, what you overly did before. So you've got to do a lot to clean up that and get that trust back.
Yeah.
And for my part, I never faced it in New York, but yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
just think, I don't know, it seems like what we see around the country is worse, right? But it doesn't excuse New York's problems. You know, I just wonder if some of it is an overcorrection to what we're seeing nationwide.
yeah.
Mm.
I think there might be a necessity though. Like we're seeing too much, even if it's a media biased in reporting or media over reporting of certain things. There should be a much smaller margin of error when you're talking about the responsibility that law enforcement has, not just NYPD, but across the country. Um, there should be a much smaller error and should be no tolerance to bad actors, because you're talking about responsibility, you're talking about the public trust, and you're talking about the public safety. It's not just a regular job. This is not like I messed up your order at Burger King and put mustard on your hamburger.
On the burger.
You know, this is a serious responsibility. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's necessary. It's this clean house thing needs to be done.
You know, and you can certainly see it from the perspective of, look, if you're going to stop someone and interfere with their day, right? And again, we talked about how, you know, even for me, I'm walking down the street and I'm an attorney, I'm a political figure. I know I'm not out here committing crimes, but I still get that feeling like, why is a police officer stopping? What is this about, right? I think it's a natural reaction for anyone to have. If you're a person of color, that's magnified, right?
Right.
So I think it's natural to say, listen, if you're going to stop someone and interrupt their day in such a way, maybe the least you could do is create a document of what happened,
Right.
you know?
And I
Right.
think, you know what? I think and I don't think we really touched on it last week. I think that could possibly deter some of those frivolous stops. Like if, oh, I've got to document it, well, maybe I just, yeah, whatever. Maybe they'll only stop when there is a real reason to stop.
I think
So they won't
that's
have to,
right. I think that's the idea behind it, certainly.
yeah.
Mm.
So,
All right. Well, I think we're kind of long.
yes.
Go to our bottom line.
Yep. I don't know. I
Jay,
think what I just
bottom
said
line?
sounded like a bottom line.
Yeah. I like that idea of no margin of error. That be
Right.
a bottom line. Could you maybe work that
I
in
think,
somehow?
yeah, well, I think you know, I would just reiterate what I said there when we're talking, and I've said it before, we've talked about this before, and I think people
Mm.
like police officers, like law enforcement, that includes politicians, um, they're not just doing a job, they have a responsibility. And so the uh, punishment or the scrutiny should be much higher for whatever they do when they do wrongdoing, because they're dealing with public trust, they're dealing with responsibility. Um, you know, like I said, it's not just like messing up somebody's order. You know,
Right.
we all kind of tend to lean into to something, even if
Mm.
it's dangerous. Like when you first start driving, you know, you're on 10 and 2 and you're very upright. You know, 6 months later, after you've eased into it, you're like chilling like this. You got your drink, you're playing with the radio, because you take that responsibility, becomes a little bit more of a normal situation. But I don't think when you're dealing with police, law enforcement, you're dealing with politicians, I don't think there's the luxury of that, because so many people's lives are intertwined with that and so much is at stake there. We need to scrutinize those better. So I think we need to keep moving forward and try to amend and fix these systems so they can work better.
Yeah. There you go. And real
Yeah.
quick, it's funny. I just had a thought. We were talking about Tin Cup Day when I was in Albany, when Mayor de Blasio at the time was up there asking for more mayoral control, right? You want that to be extended again, as the mayors do. It was a very small hearing room. I think I had to go take care of something, file some paper, do something else at the time. And so I wasn't there at the beginning of the meeting, but then I had to kind of like run down the hallway and try to make it into the meeting before I missed too much of it. And I remember just like running down the hall in Albany, in the Capitol building, and finding out, where the room was. Okay, it's this room over here. Opening the door, pulling it open, and I walk in, and it's kind of like this small little meeting room, and De Blasio is right there giving his speech, saying, this is why we need more mayoral control. And I basically interrupted him by opening the door, and everyone's like looking at me. I'm like, oh, okay, here we are. I'm thrust right in the midst of this battle, and that was always just a funny moment that always stuck in my head. I guess because it's such a big thing happening, right? It's the mayor of New York City in Albany at the state capitol arguing for mayoral control and more money for the city and all these different things. But it's all happening in like some small, almost like a classroom or something like that down a hall. You walk in, you just interrupt by stepping into it. So I don't know. I guess maybe it's a reminder that sometimes very important conversations happen even when it doesn't feel like you're in a big grand venue.
Right. Absolutely. So where can they find us, Mike?
They can find us everywhere, right? Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can subscribe. That's Spotify, Apple Music, so on and so forth. You can get the audio pushed directly to your device. We're on YouTube at Nuance with Mike Scala and Jay Carter. We've got all of the audio and videos up there as well as clips and shorts and whatnot. We're on Instagram at Nuance Show. We're on Reddit at Nuance Show on social media. So find us, get involved with the discussions, give your answers to polls. I believe you post them on Daily Kos, is it?
Post, yeah.
Find us there as well. Let us know what you think. And of course, we're live on Facebook on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank people in the comments as well. And I guess I'll say it. We've got work to do.
There it is. We'll catch you next time.